President a number of times, being consistent in his respect for due process, in his respect for the judiciary, and in his support and commitment to respecting the role of the courts in resolving matters of dispute, which is something that's well expressed and covered within our constitutional framework. And so we will be watching and listening and going through the judgment, as I'm sure all of you will be doing. There's nothing further that we can say about that imminent judgment. The President is attending to the matter. The Minister has delivered her report to the President, articulating her side of the story with respect to the vehicles and other issues. As you know, the President prefers to take his time when he's dealing with such matters, and so he will not be under any form of pressure to arrive at whatever decision he may arrive at. But it's a matter that he's on top of, and he's aware of all the issues. And without speculating, I'm sure in the next couple of weeks or so, he will be meeting with the Minister. You said, is the President worried about ministers that are facing public scrutiny? So with respect to Minister Malatsi, for example, I'm sure you're referring to the AI, the use of AI issue. The Minister came forward and came out and issued a statement, and from what we understand is that the Minister is addressing the matter, and the matter is being looked at internally in terms of internal controls, but also further investigations to ascertain what happened and what went wrong. And so there is a learning opportunity there. I don't think the public scrutiny as such is on the Minister personally, but it's scrutiny that's being subjected to the entire department with respect to its own internal controls, as well as how it chooses to deploy AI tools. So that's where the issue is. Which other minister you mentioned? Minister Khwarube, you're referring to the publishing matter. So that matter has been referred to, from what I understand, the Minister has referred it to National Treasury for further investigation to see if any procurement regulations were violated. And I'm sure once that investigation has been concluded, the necessary steps will then be followed. These sort of, especially procurement, as you know, we've been plagued by troubles and problems, all sorts of problems with respect to procurement. In fact, fairly soon, the President will be announcing an intervention of some sort with respect to procurement. If you look at what's coming out at the Madlanga Commission, issues of procurement are there. If you look at what came out of the Zondo Commission, again. So we've been plagued by all sorts of challenges with respect to procurement issues. And so I wouldn't characterize that issue as an issue that affects the Minister unless you're saying the Minister was directly involved in the procurement process, which is not the case. She was not. And so it's an issue that she's responded to fairly quickly that's impacting her department, and it's an issue that she must attend to, and she is attending to it. And so there's no concern on the side of the President in that respect. The concern is, despite everything else we've tried to do, despite the existence of the PFMA, we are still being plagued by these challenges with respect to procurement. As I said, sooner or later the President will be announcing an intervention that will hopefully, not hopefully, that will certainly assist us to get out of these issues. Sarah?
Taurus versus Day. Vincent, the National Treasury recently sent a letter to Executive Mayor Jacob Zuma.
Not xenophobic. What you have are pockets of protest, which is permissible within our constitutional framework. You also have the reality that the issue of immigration is a pressure point, not only here in South Africa, but throughout the world, where protests are held on these issues. What is important from our perspective is obviously respecting the rights of everybody that is within our borders, and to, when we protest, to do so peacefully without causing harm to anybody. And in this regard, the President expects law enforcement to also play its role to prevent any acts of violence against any individual. Yesterday, both President Chapo and President Ramaphosa also agreed that the continent needs to work together to address the issues that are behind these levels of migration that we see across our continent. Issues of conflicts, issues of instability, and in some areas, if we're being honest, the misgovernance that causes people to migrate in large numbers and seek refuge in different parts of the continent, including South Africa. And so the condemnations that we've had coming from the different quarters on the continent should not just end in condemnations, but there should also be willingness to constructively engage on what are these issues and factors behind people seeking to leave their countries of birth and seeking refuge elsewhere. So they both agreed that there has to be that genuine, open and frank conversation across the continent. But the President did emphasize that South Africa is a welcoming country. South Africans are open, friendly and warm people, and we will reject any notion that seeks to characterize this country or its people as being xenophobic. In fact, any characterization of this protest that seeks to portray South Africans as xenophobic is actually lazy sort of analysis of the real issues that are at play here. There are I don't know. I mean, why would you use the description peace meeting as if they've been at war? They've not been at war. It's a political. I suppose it could be both political, as well as the reality that former President Zuma is a former head of state. As a former head of state, he does have access to the sitting head of state, and if there are issues that he wishes to posit with the current head of state, he will be open to do so. And President Ramaphosa will be open to a discussion with any former head of state, whether it's President Mbeki or President Zuma or President Motlanthe. The President will be open to engaging any of them. They do see each other in various events. President Mbeki attends ANC, NEC meetings, and they will have a chat there. Similarly, recently the President was in Eswatini, and so former President Zuma, and they greeted very warmly. They had a bit of a chat. And so I don't see it as something that will necessarily be dubbed as a peace meeting. They've not been at war. Do they hold different political views? In a way, yes. Former President Zuma went on to form his own party. And so, yeah, but it won't be necessarily a peace meeting. It will be a question of a former head of state engaging with a sitting head of state over whatever issues he may have that are issues of concern or suggestions that he may have. But it's something that President Ramaphosa will be very open to. He will have no issue with meeting with former President Zuma. The Zim visit and the commentary, Peter, Look, we've seen similar commentary. At this stage, I don't have an indication from the president that he wants us to Mnangagwa, and so I'm not at liberty to comment on what exactly they discussed, except to say they will have engaged quite deeply and quite thoroughly on issues of mutual and bilateral interest. And some of those issues will include developments in Zimbabwe, the president is also a resident of Cape Town, and they've been together in a number of public and government events here in Cape Town. The meeting was really to, I suppose, to sort of cement, the commitment to keeping or maintaining the stability of the GNU, and to also commit to further collaboration. At this stage, as you know, Mayor Hill-Lewis has indicated he will not be joining cabinet. The president has regular engagements with the various ministers that were deployed from the DA. And so in that regard, it was important for Mayor Hill-Lewis and the president to establish a communication channel as GNU partners, as it does with all other parties as well. And so in that sense, it was a good meeting with respect to solidifying the commitment towards maintaining the stability of the GNU and further collaboration on a wide range of issues that may impact the GNU or that are of interest to the GNU. But it was a very positive meeting. And so there's not going to be, we don't anticipate on the side of the president, he doesn't anticipate an adverse sort of impact, if that's what your question is. How is it going to impact the GNU? It's not going to impact the GNU in any other way that will undermine the stability of the GNU, right? And you'll have noticed that there is now a great deal of maturity across all parties with respect to how they engage with one another, with respect to how they collaborate. I think I shared with some of your colleagues, even though I'm not allowed to talk about what happens in Cabinet Lekgotla meetings, but I did, take the risk of being scolded by our DG, that one of the things I observed, particularly at this last Lekgotla that was held earlier this year, I observed ministers that were engaging as ministers of one government. I observed premiers from different parts of the country, from different organizations, who were engaging as part of one government. So there were moments where you will find certain ministers from the DA agreeing with ministers from the ANC on a particular issue, or with a premier that comes from an ANC-led province. And so since 2020, when was it, 2024? It feels like a long time. Since 2024 and the establishment of the GNU, there's been a great deal of maturity in how the different members of the GNU work with each other. And that was quite evident at that Lekgotla, that where there were disagreements, those disagreements were across the board. I definitely saw and experienced ministers, cabinet ministers, that were singing off the same hymn sheet, representing one government, and it was the same dynamic with the premiers that were present in that meeting. And so as things stand, the president is very comfortable that the GNU is stable and that the leadership changes that have taken place in the DA, if anything, they will strengthen that stability.